Hi, John. There it is. A lot easier this way than 552 actual kingdoms. That's true. All right, can I have your attention? I am so happy to have all of you here today as we celebrate Copernicus' 552nd birthday. Actually, it's a little late. It was back on the 19th of February, but we're very fortunate to have this facility here. It was just a little over 50 years ago that a group of Polish immigrants wanted to commemorate Copernicus' 500th birthday and built the original observatory. And we've been doing STEM, giving people access to the night skies ever since. And so every winter we do this winter star party. Although at this point I'm about to say about the end of winter star party. And so let's sing happy birthday to Mikolaj Kopernik. Ready? Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, Mikolaj Kopernik. Happy birthday to you. All right, I'll give you a pass on that one. Right, can I have you blow the candle out? All right. All right. If you haven't already, come on up to grab a cupcake. We've got some hot chocolate or coffee. And at 7:30, we're going to invite you to come into the Space Science Lab. We have a proclamation from Governor Hochul, and we're going to then start the rest of our program. So we'll see you in about 20 minutes or so in our Space Science Lab.
Well, good evening, and it's great. It's great to see you all here this evening. For those who don't know me, my name is Drew Desker. I'm the director here at the Kopernik Observatory, and we are celebrating Winter Star Party. Although, like I said, at this point, I'm about ready to say, let's get to the end of Winter Star Party, and it's been great to have a bunch of new people here that perhaps haven't been here in a long time, or maybe this is, in fact, is your first time here. We wish we had better skies tonight, but who knows? We may be able to get some a little bit later. Here we go. All right. So a star party is really an opportunity for people to get together and talk to each other about astronomy. Hopefully, do a little bit of observing, but ultimately sort of share that interest in what's really out there. And that's really sort of what got this place started. Back in the early 1970s, there was a group of Polish immigrants, people of Polish heritage, that wanted to commemorate Copernic's 500th birthday. In 1973, he would have been 500 years old. And as I always like to say, rather than buy a statue, plunk it in a park, they said, let's do something. So they built the original observatory, which was this brick wall is part of the original building, and then two of our domes. And then now 50 years later, here we are, still up on top of a hill, but we are much more than just 3 telescopes on the top of a hill. Earlier this year, actually about 3 or 4 months ago, we were very fortunate to have Governor Hochul come visit and tour the facility in celebration of our 50th anniversary. And this evening, one of Governor Hochul's staff members, Harris Weiss, is here and wanted to offer a proclamation. So Harris, if I could have you come up here.
Thank you so much. I'm going to read some of it, not all of it. It's wordy, and there's a lot of whereases, so you can read it if you're interested, but I'm going to read some of the more important ones that I think are relevant. So, whereas New York State strives to maintain the excellence of its many outstanding educational institutions and strengthen the impact they have on those who serve, it is therefore appropriate that we acknowledge the Kopernik Observatory and Science Center on the occasion of its 50th anniversary. And whereas the Kopernik Observatory was founded by the Kopernik Society of Broome County and opened in 1974 in celebration of the 500th anniversary of the birth of the famed astronomer Mikolaj Kopernik, also known as Nicholas Copernicus, and the building was constructed atop a 1,700-foot tall hill in the town of Vestal, and has since become one of the best sited and best equipped observatories in the Northeast United States for several decades. It is designed for K-12 students, teachers, and families to enjoy through hands-on learning and interactive technology. Whereas students participating in the observatory's programming are prompted to utilize the scientific inquiry process and build upon various skills including experimentation, observation, measurement, and the use of tools. Projects involving topics such as magnetism, engineering, and programming are available for school trips and can be brought to the classrooms. Whereas public activities are held in the facility, in public libraries for summer enrichment, and through summer camps, the week-long Link Summer STEM Exploration Program for students grades 2 to 12, and the Copernicus program for young children, and the Girl Power series empower participants to pursue age-appropriate STEM learning while making new friends. And now, therefore, I, Kathy Hochul, Governor of the State of New York, do hereby confer this special citation upon the Kopernik Observatory and Science Center and best wishes for the future success.
Thank you. Thank you, Harris. Could I ask our board members and staff members to come up for a photo op? Thank you. So give us a moment here.
Thank you.
That's the whole thing here. All right. Yeah, interns as well. Yep.
I think we can fill in on the other side too.
And as always, short people. One more. All right. Well, one of the things that Governor Hochul did when she came down here was something I never expected, but I'm very grateful for. She brought a check for $1 million. Out in the lobby, as you took a look around, you saw some elevations of what we would like this facility to turn into. It's been over 30 years since any real serious work has been done on the facility, and so we are now in the midst of a capital campaign that will expand our facility, update and upgrade the technology we have going here. We've already received a very generous grant to get a STEM van and outfit it with another portable planetarium and additional technology that we can take out into schools and into the community. And we are very grateful to the governor for getting us started on this capital campaign. So thank you again. So a little over a year ago, year and a half ago, we had an event called the Astrofest, and we decided what we wanted to do was to open up what we thought was going to be a time capsule back behind the in the wall here. And so this is a picture back in 1973 as they were doing some fundraising. On the left, in the red jacket, is Dr. Ed Kozlowski. He was one of the founding members of the Copernic Society of Broome County. On the far right is Richard Miller, who was a state legislator for many years. The man in the middle, in the sort of plaidish jacket, is Ed Neslik. He was the contractor. All three of those gentlemen actually have Polish extraction. But the gentleman in the black jacket is Commander Jim Lovell of Apollo 13. This is 2 years after the Apollo 13 mission, and he came up here to help us fundraise, and there is our cornerstone. So I'm actually going to show you now let me see here. Okay, actually, let me go to my video here. And for those of you who are here for the for Astrofest and the opening of the and where's my mouse? Somewhere in here. Oh, come on. There we go. The audio is a little muted, but you get the gist. Yeah, just drop it.
Oh, you're just going to lay it on his face, okay.
And we have
A box.
a box. And that box has a lock on it.
Whichever.
All right. Well, what we're going to do is keep all the dust over here. This took me about 3 hours to chisel away all the mortar over the past couple of days. It's like unwrapping a bread, yeah, a loaf of bread. It takes forever. I don't see a key. There was no key. So I put my engineering degree to work. All right. Polish soil. That's a great first thing to come out. So this is, I think, Kopernik was born in Turin, Poland, and so here's some soil from Poland. Right, from inside, we have another bags. We got some coins, somebody's car keys. We actually have those items up here, and actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to...
Yeah, they're keeping the boxes inside.
We'll sort of stop here and go back to our slide and show you what we actually have, what we actually found there. So this again is what was ultimately in the box. But to go so take it piece by piece, this is a newspaper article on Richard DeLuca. Richard DeLuca was the director of Roberson's planetarium, and he was the one that actually came up and found our first dome. The dome that, for those of you that walked into our observatory, went into the 6-inch dome with the refractor in it, that is the original, that was that dome that he found. Here was the big dinner dance held at the Fountains Pavilion, for those of you who can remember that the Fountains Pavilion actually existed. And that had Commander Jim Lovell as the keynote speaker. And this was the actual opening dedication day in 1974, when Copernicus officially opened its doors to the public. And listing, again, a very, very strong, very active Polish community, very proud of what they've done, and the Polish community, the Kopernik Society of Broome County still promotes Polish culture here in the southern tier. Here are some pictures. In the upper right-hand corner is Dr. Ed Kozlowski and his wife Valentina. Dr. Ed unfortunately died very early in 2000, and we were very fortunate that back in October we had a 50th anniversary gala down at the Doubletree Hotel, and Valentina was actually at that celebration. And unfortunately, she passed away like 10 days later, but we were very fortunate to have had her with us. And so these were some of the Polaroids that were inside that box. And then the listing of all the people in the Polish the Kopernik Society that helped donate and make the observatory actually happen. And of course, again, being Polish, it's actually part of our Constitution is actually to promote Polish heritage, and so here was an article about pierogies that was in fact in the in the time capsule. So this actually is a picture of our night sky with our Kopernik Science Park, but we are now actually starting to put together what we will put into the back into the time capsule. So we'll collect this all and mark it for the 1973-74 information or contents. Out in the main lobby, we have a table set up with items that we are going to put in, including our current strategic plan, what we're offering schools. We're putting an iPhone in there with a charger. We were donated a COVID test, right, and a COVID mask, a Kopernik branded COVID mask. We have Kopernik branded eclipse glasses for the eclipse that happened somewhere in the U.S., not necessarily here. But anyway, so we will be reinstalling that time capsule back in this wall, and then putting the cornerstone back on. And so so for those, some of you may actually be here in 50 years. All right, so you can say that you were here for that. Okay. In fact, we'll try to take some pictures and make sure that they get into the iPhone so that you can then say, oh yeah, that was me 50 years ago. All right. One of the things we do here that I really enjoy a lot is our Friday night programs. Now, yeah, I know, Drew, this is Saturday, but this is a special day. But from March to mid-December, we always do some sort of a public program where we feature some aspect of science or technology and communicate that to the public. It's not always about astronomy. We've had people talk about the physics of music. Why does an oboe, a trumpet, and a violin all sound different playing the same note? We've had people from the National Weather Service here talking about just this past year the 32 tornadoes that has been in New York State this past year in 2024. it's an opportunity for us to sort of continue our lifelong learning. So all of you, especially younger people, school doesn't end at 12th grade or at the end of college. It's a lifelong pursuit. And you can see a lot of us, people especially with gray hair, are still here trying to learn more. Quite frankly, I wish I could be living another 50, 100 years, just to see how far technology has come. Like, when I was your age, I used to have to walk to the TV to change the channel. Now, of course, I can just watch it on my phone. But how far will technology and healthcare and progress? And so I think you guys are really in for a very interesting time. So, but to that end, we've actually got, we'll start a little bit early, I think. Is Professor Glenn here? I think he may still be out there. Could, Sasha, are you? Yeah, if we could, we'll go get, queue up our speaker. But actually, you said, while we're doing that, let me point out a couple other things here we've got. So on our website, we always keep you up to date with what's going on. So obviously today is our Winter Star Party. We have the return of our Kopernik Kids program. Our summer camps will be announced very soon, and those have been very popular. But with those Friday night programs, actually back in 2020, we had to stop doing Friday night programs because of COVID. And we felt okay, look, we'll just wait a couple of weeks for this COVID thing to blow over, and well, that didn't exactly play out that way. So what we thought, look, we've got all these speakers lined up. Why don't we have them zoom into us, and then we'll just turn it back around and put it out on a YouTube channel. Our YouTube channel now has almost 14,000 subscribers. And one of the beautiful things about this is, even if you can't make it up here on a Friday night, you can watch it live on a YouTube channel, or you can watch it the next day or the next week. In fact, actually, there's people from literally around the world that will watch and tune into our live stream. In fact, there's this woman in Adelaide, Australia, who is usually Saturday morning is having breakfast and is watching our live stream. So, but anyway, as I mentioned, you can see all sorts of, our Winter Star Party will be on there. Our, previous talks, talking about, bacterial biofilms or black holes on Black Friday, record numbers of tornadoes. So it's not always about space. Here was a natural building with straw bales. So it's definitely worth checking out. And we even have our 50th anniversary celebration is also, you can down at the DoubleTree, you can see that as well. But we're very fortunate this evening to have Professor Andrew Glenn from SUNY Broome to come and talk about the universe and the history of the universe. And I think one of the things about science is that it's always progressing. We observe, we postulate how things work, but as we begin to learn more, then our view of that topic or that subject, it changes, or it evolves, and I'm going to guess that's what we're going to learn a little about this evening. So if I could get you to come up here, and we'll get you mic'd up.
We'll see how it goes. Oh, in a second? How about now? Oh, that's going to be weird. All right. Never listen to myself. All right, so yeah, I'm Professor Andrew Glenn from SUNY Broome. I teach astronomy and physics there and have for, well, quite a while. So I was asked to come up and give a talk, and I eventually said yes, because there's a couple that have been asking me for a while. And I wasn't sure what to give a talk on, and came up with all sorts of different topics, and I'm awful at choosing a topic on my own. And this topic was actually brought up by Jenny back here, in terms of who's heard it before and thought that'd be fun. And I thought, yeah, I can do that. And this really fits in with, where we come from and how we got to where we are today. And this is, when we're talking about the universe, really I'm going to stop myself from getting too much into cosmology, because if I start on that, we'll be here all night, and none of us want that. But it's really going to be about sort of where we started and how we really got to our first place in the universe. As of, well, hopefully I get to Newton. We'll see if I can get that far today. But what we're looking at here is, if we start at the beginning, and for this, the beginning, I'm talking about over 2,000 years ago, 2,500, 3,000 years ago, naked eye observing, okay? They were able to see a lot of things. And the thing that you'll see, and the thing that always fascinates me here, is that the ancients who looked at the sky and understood things, well, we always think we're so much more advanced now, and honestly, they were just as smart as we were. We're just using what they did to get there. So they knew a lot about the sky and about the universe at this time, and just by naked eye observing, here are the things they knew. They knew, for example, that Mercury and Venus are always close to the sun, but they can go east or west, kind of randomly, various speeds, some weird things happen in there. Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. Remember, naked eye observing, these are the planets that they could actually see. They saw these objects wandering across the sky, and they saw they almost always move east. But sometimes they turn around and go west. And this is called retrograde motion. And one of the things we'll see as we work through, this is the thing that caused all sorts of problems for a lot of people trying to understand how the solar system worked for a long time. And finally, the stars remain still. And that may seem silly now, but bear with me, and that becomes a really, really, really important point. Okay? But this is what we knew. And honestly, even back then, we knew, for example, we knew the Earth was round. They knew that back then. This wasn't discovered by Columbus in any way, shape, or form. They knew the Earth was round. In fact, a couple hundred BC, they actually had a pretty good idea of the circumference just by measuring shadows. They had a really good idea of how things worked. They just, technology was a little behind where we're at now. Okay, so I'm going to start early cosmology. And cosmology is just a study of the universe, right? And we'll start almost 2,500 years ago with Aristotle, who we've probably heard of. And he came up with one of the first recorded, and really we start with Aristotle, because his cosmology is the one that sort of has been remembered since then. Oh, there I go. Saw that coming. So here's what he had. He had, okay, the Earth is a sphere. Well, again, they knew the Earth was round. But he said, no, the Earth is a sphere. Why is it a sphere? We like spheres. Spheres are perfect, right? Remember, these early guys especially, they weren't so much scientists as they were philosophers. It was more about how the universe works, how the gods made the universe, how we want it to work. I mean, one of the ways they knew that, if you look during a lunar eclipse, the shadow of the Earth on the moon is curved, no matter where it is in the sky. So that means the Earth has to be a sphere, or at least really close. But they had it as a sphere. Also, this is a big one, the Earth is stationary. The Earth is not moving. How do we know the Earth isn't moving? Okay, I know it's a Friday night, but still early, and I didn't see an open bar. We don't feel like we're moving, right? In class, I check. It's usually on a Thursday, Tuesday afternoon, and there should not be moving either, just at that time. But you don't feel like you're moving. And also, if you drop something, fall straight down. I like the gravity checks on occasion, too. Yeah, still there. So what we have, right, is that they said there's no way the Earth is moving. The Earth has to be stationary. Well, if the Earth is stationary and the Earth is a sphere, well, then that means everything must orbit around us. Okay? So they decided, okay, every other celestial body rotates around in a circular orbit with the Earth at the center. Circular? Circles are perfect. We like circles. Circles are easy. Of course they're circles. Led to what's called the crystalline sphere theory, which here's an example from one of my textbooks. And I mean, all we've basically got here, we have the Earth. And the basic idea is that everything was embedded. All these celestial objects were embedded within some crystalline sphere centered on the Earth that just rotated around the Earth. Now, you may be asking yourself, why is there no Mercury on here? I have no idea. No, they knew it. They knew it was there. Whoever made this figure went, Mercury. Sure.
We don't care about Mercury.
Apparently they didn't. I have no problem with it. Mercury never did anything to me personally that I know of. Now I have to look. Anyway, but here's a couple important things. So we have the moon closer. That should be Mercury, Venus, Sun, up to Saturn. Now here's the big one out here. Okay, this last crystalline sphere, the idea was that all the stars were embedded within that, and they just kind of rotated around the Earth. Because if you lay it out and watch the sky at night, you'll see the stars slowly rotate overhead. So this was kind of the best they had. Right? So this is Aristotle, a few hundred BC. Now, soon after that, another guy came up named Aristarchus. And he started, instead of going, hey, here's how I want the universe to look, he actually made some observations. Go figure. So he actually came up with what's called a heliocentric cosmology, which is sun-centered. Why did he do that? Well, he said, I can figure out the phases of the moon. He said, and if the moon's at first quarter, okay, that means this has to be a 90-degree angle. Okay, so I can make a triangle here. And if I measure the angle between the moon and the sun, I can figure out the relative distances of these things. That'll work. I'm pretty good there. You know what he found? He found this angle A was really, 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 really close to 90 degrees. That means if you think about your triangles, these all have to add up to 180. So the closer this gets to 90, the more extended this triangle gets, and the further and further and further away the sun becomes. So he started there. He said, okay, so this means the moon has to be much, much, much closer to the Earth than the sun. In fact, he estimated 400 times closer. Now here's the other catch. The moon and the sun both take up the same angle in the sky. So that means if these two things take up the same angle, but one is much, much further away, the thing that's further away has to be a lot bigger, doesn't it? 400 times bigger. So he went, okay, sun has to be much, much, much bigger than the moon. And through lunar eclipses, he estimated, the moon's about 1/3 the size of the Earth. So he says, wait, if the moon's 1/3 the size of the Earth and the sun's 300 times bigger than the moon, the sun's at least 100 times bigger than the Earth. Not bad. It's good work. He says, all right, let's have the smaller things go around the bigger thing. Makes sense. Cool. So he puts this out here, and he had two big problems that people just didn't want to buy this. Okay, one, I'll talk about parallax in a second. The first, okay, most people like being told this, that they're the center of the universe. So if you've been told that for a long time, yeah. The other thing, I always say, how many people have heard of Aristotle? Yeah, most. How many people have heard of Aristarchus? Yeah, there you go. Probably going to listen to the popular guy that everybody knows more than anything, right? Aristarchus saying you're not the center of the universe. Aristotle's more famous. Yeah, probably there. Now, parallax, this is a fun one. We'll do a little bit of interaction here. So what parallax is if the Earth goes around the sun, the stars should shift a little bit over time. Okay, try this for me. Put your thumb out in front of your face. Okay, look at something in the distance. Close one eye. Now close the other one. Your thumb bounces back and forth a little bit, doesn't it? That's parallax. So as we go around the sun, say your right eye is January and your left eye is July, we should see stars, especially nearby stars, bounce around in the sky. They should have a little bit of motion going on. We don't see that at all. They weren't able to observe that at all in the ancient world through naked eye observing. Now, anybody who's paying attention, you might think, okay, I know why that is. And I'll give you a hint now. So hold your thumb out like this. Now bring it in really close. Where does it move more? When it's closer or further away?
Closer.
When it's closer, right? Keep that in mind. That'll be important later. So the idea of a heliocentric universe did start way back then, but with no parallax, there was nothing to really, show it or prove it, so we kind of let that one go. So next up, and this is the one that sort of really hung on for a while, and this is Claudius Ptolemy at 1 to 200 AD. Came up with what, got known as the Ptolemaic model, of course. So this is geocentric, and building off of what Aristotle had. And they noticed, and they'd been observing the planets for a while now, and they noticed, okay, this doesn't always work. Crystalline spheres, let's say they have a rough time with retrograde, right? Why would a sphere stop and turn around and go back the other way? They couldn't explain that at all. Okay? What about planetary speeds? Why do sometimes they move faster and then others? So he moved the Earth, instead of being directly at the center, he moved a little bit off center. Why? Okay, so it can explain the planetary speed variations. That's about it. To account for retrograde motion, love this. Okay? He created epicycles. And I'll bring this up for a second. An epicycle. He said, okay, let's take Mars. Well, Mars isn't embedded in its crystalline sphere, but it has another sphere that's embedded on that one that Mars travels on. So as it goes this way, it also circles around on a smaller sphere, the epicycle. Beautiful, isn't it? He really invented the first spirograph, is what he really did. But aside from that, I mean, it kind of worked, maybe a little bit. And then for Mercury and Venus to always be close to the sun, well, then he had to really get out there and say, okay, if it's always close to the sun, they have to have their own epicycles, but their epicycles have to be centered on a line between the Earth and the sun, so that as the sun moves, those two move with it, so they're always close to the sun. I mean, he was reaching here, right? I mean, spoiler, I think we all know where this is going to end up. But this got complicated. And he had to make it this complicated in order to actually explain the motions they saw in the sky. As time went on, they were able to observe the positions of things better and better and better. And as they did that, they realized how bad this model was. So as time went on, right, with any good scientific model, the question is, how is it at prediction? Okay, the accuracy they could measure in terms of where something is in the sky was 1 or 2 arc minutes. About 1 arc minute's about 1/30th the size of the full moon. Pretty good for that time. Well, over time, the Ptolemaic model expected positions were off by 1 or 2 degrees. 4 full moons away from where it should be. Not even close. So what they do in the years after Ptolemy, they started adding epicycles onto the epicycles. Some bigger, some smaller, some bigger, some smaller. The last one I think I saw that somebody wrote and made a picture of had, I think Mars had 5 different epicycles of varying sizes, and it was a little crazy. They were getting out there. So you think, okay, got to be something simpler, right? Okay, and here is, and I'm just going to go ahead and apologize. This is the Anglicization of Kopernik. I'll apologize for that now to everyone involved, but this is how I always learned it. And Copernicus himself, okay, Polish merchant son, educated in Italy, well educated, okay, and during a planetary conjunction, he noticed just how bad the Ptolemaic model was. Planetary conjunction, for those of you paying attention, there's kind of one of those happening now, right? Planets are supposed to be pretty close together in the sky. He looked on the day the Ptolemaic model predicted these planets to be close together in the sky. They were like there. Not even close. He said, okay, we can do this better. So he tried a bunch of different things. And he wound up figuring the simplest model was heliocentric. He went back to heliocentrism, to the sun at the center with circular orbits. All right, not bad. The beauty of this, and I'll try not to get too involved on this, but you don't have to come up with and jump through all these hoops to make Mercury and Venus in retrograde work. The heliocentric model is beautiful that way. Okay? Mercury and Venus, you know what you have to do to make those always appear close to the sun? Give them smaller orbits than the Earth. That way, no matter where you look, there's no way they can ever be behind the Earth compared to the sun. So they're always going to be close. And retrograde, it honestly explains retrograde beautifully, right? I'll give the example I always give to my students in class because I think it works best. Retrograde is actually caused by a faster planet passing a slower one. The closer you are to the sun, faster you move in your orbit. So when we from the Earth look at Mars, we pass it going faster than Mars is. Okay. Here's my example. Imagine you're driving on a 3-lane highway. The right lane of cars are cars stopped because they're getting off an exit. In the middle lane's a car going, 55. They're taking their time. You're in the left lane going, okay, speed limit. Let's go with that. But as you catch up to that slower car, you see it passing the stopped cars, right? Now, what about as you pass that slower car? When you look at that slower car, as you pass it, it appears to be going backward compared to the cars that are stopped, doesn't it? And then when you get in front, you look back at it, it's passing those slower cars again. Now, did that slower car ever slam on the brakes and go in reverse on the interstate? No. Didn't have to, did it? The same way the planets. Mars doesn't have to slam on the brakes and go backwards. All you have to do is pass it faster, and it appears to move backwards with respect to the background stars, or the stopped cars, right? So no matter where you are in the solar system, a planet further away will appear to go into retrograde. If you're on Venus, the Earth would go into retrograde. But none of them ever stop and turn around. So heliocentric really, really, really nicely takes care of those sort of weird things Ptolemy had to introduce. That's a beautiful thing about it. Now, also for the speed variations, the Earth's at different places in its orbit as things are moving. Sometimes they're closer, sometimes they're slower. So he wrote up the idea in 1512. He didn't actually publish it until 1543 due to pressure from the church. Right, we're talking sort of mid-Renaissance here, right? Think about it. What was the dominant political entity in Europe at this time? Catholic Church, right? I'm not going to say they made a living on saying the Earth was the center of the universe, but it didn't hurt them at all. And they kind of wanted that to remain. And Copernicus did, in fact, work for the church. He was a canon at one of the churches, so he didn't really want to lose his job, and really he could have been brought up on a lot of charges for doing this. So he wound up only publishing on his deathbed. He didn't have a whole lot of family to leave behind that could be punished, and he wanted to get this out there. Now, not to speak ill, it wasn't a great book. It was dry. It was a very scientific treatise. It was not an easy read, but it did get out there. Okay, now we ask, okay, with science, how was the prediction? Well, we still don't feel the Earth moving, do we? Okay, we still don't see parallax either. This isn't not great. Planetary positions, how about this? No, they were pretty bad too. It didn't really work, which honestly probably helped him get it published. He was able to put a foreword in that said, this is a work of fiction, as shown by the fact it doesn't work any better. So he got to have it published. And this might be, well, what the blank is going on here? Because this is how it works. We know this is how it works. We know the sun's at the center. Well, he was missing one really, really, really important thing. I'm going to leave that for later. But there was one thing he was still missing. This is how you keep the students interested. So, next up, or at least I try. The ones that are here, they're here for a reason. So what we've got, next up, man, this is one of my favorites. I'll try not to spend too much time on him. I call him the first astronomer. I should call him the first modern astronomer, but he's one of my favorite guys. Tycho Brahe. Very diaphragm in that name. It's a fantastic Danish name. Tycho, oh, this kid. So, born in Denmark. I say no real education. He was completely educated. He just never cared. He didn't have to study. No, for this reason right here. So, Tycho, actually I'm going to leave this here because we'll talk about this first. So, Tycho was born first son to the second son of a family with land and title and everything else. And, well, the older brother was never going to have any kids. Decide amongst yourselves. But the younger brother said, you can have my firstborn to carry on the family name and land. Older brother was like, cool, we can do that. Tycho was born. His parents went, yeah, can we keep him? We'd like to keep him. Can we keep him? The older brother said no and kidnapped him. At that point, you couldn't call the authorities because on his land, he was the authorities. So basically, his uncle kidnapped Tycho and raised him as his own. Okay. Well, it's a beginning to a life that's not fantastic, but then we go to the next thing. As he and his uncle slash kidnapper are walking along, slash father, were walking along the beach one day, they noticed a guy out drowning. Uncle swam out to get him, saved him. Guess who he saved? The King of Denmark. saved the king of Denmark from drowning. His uncle slash foster father slash kidnapper then died of pneumonia soon after. If you saw this on TV, you wouldn't believe it. Well, this means the king of Denmark owes who his life? Young Tycho Brahe. This meant he now could have anything he wanted in life. He was set, man. He could do whatever he wanted. I'm not going to go into what I usually talk about in class because it's a live stream, but he could do basically anything he wanted. I see the laughing now. He could do anything he wanted to do. And really what that ended up being, like I said, he went to school. He didn't have to care. He was made no matter what. So what'd he do? Well, like all of us would like to, he drank a lot and stayed up all night. We've been there. We've been through college. It's all good. So he started looking at the sky. Tycho was a fascinating guy in that he was a natural observer. You know how there are people who are naturally good at something? Maybe woodworking doesn't have to be trained. They can go in and take a block of wood and make anything out of it. Tycho, natural observer. He understood how to make measurements, how to, change the accuracy, how to improve things. He was fantastic at it. So he noticed how bad the predictions were. So he started making his measurements of positions. Right? At age 25, he observed a star exploding, now called Tycho's supernova. And, well, one of the big things that had happened, with the Ptolemaic model especially, the heavens are created by the gods. The heavens are perfect. The heavens are unchanging. No, they ain't. He watched a star explode right in front of him, okay? Age 30, a comet went by that was easily visible to others around Europe. And he was able to show, when he compared that to other locations, the location of the comet was the same with respect to the stars, but different compared to the moon. So that means they're further away than the moon. Well, okay, if you've got all these crystalline spheres, how does a comet zoom in past everything and go back out? I have to say it shatters the crystalline sphere theory. I'm a dad. I'm allowed to say that. It's all good. But that's where he ended up. So he looked at all this and he thought, well, honestly, the Ptolemaic model just doesn't work, right? But he was able to show, and Tycho was a fascinating dude in so many ways. He showed there was no angular shift of the stars with the motion. He didn't observe parallax. So in theory, what he actually proved, the stars are really, really far away, right? The further away your thumb is, the less it moves, right? So he's able to prove the stars are really, really far away. What did he think he proved? He thought he proved the Earth wasn't moving. Fantastic observer. Not a great theorist. He had a few issues there. We'll talk about that in a second. His legacy, what he left behind, is really the most important thing. He made the most accurate measurements that had ever been created but to that time in history. Right? He got materials. He re-observed stars. He hired assistants to make independent measurements. All the things you'd want to do today are fantastic. He made this thing called Tycho's quadrant. He had a little chair sitting in the middle of basically a protractor right along the meridian where he had people point out angles, and they'd read off the angle and write it down what the time it was when it crossed the meridian. These fantastic measurements. Great, 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 great measurements, and years and years and years of these. It's a fantastic catalog of positions in the sky. He had the first modern observatory built. What did he do? He went to the king. He said, so, can I have some, dark land to make an observatory? The king gave him an island. Again, he was able to do pretty much whatever he wanted. He got whatever he wanted when he asked. This didn't sit well with a lot of people. Eventually, his legacy comes from hiring Johannes Kepler and naming him as a successor before Tycho drank himself to death. He'd had a rough life, folks. I'll try not to go too far into the stories because I hear different things from different places, but this man, yeah, he was a bad drunk. He would go down to town and get into these duels. He had his nose sliced off when he was young and had a prosthetic nose made out of both copper, one from copper, one in silver. He apparently had a pet elk, either a pet elk or moose that lived in the castle with him. That story goes the elk died when some guests at a party got it drunk and it fell down the stairs. These are reasons I call him the first astronomer. He stayed up too late and he drank too much. This is really kind of appropriate, really, when it comes down to it. So he was not well liked by a lot of people around him. And I can't talk, I'll talk about Tycho too long. I'll just try to end with this story. He wasn't well liked by the people around him. He eventually, when the king died, his son took over, and they kicked Tycho right out of the country. He went around a couple different places. I think he wound up outside of Budapest eventually. But at one point, he wound up dying where he was to go to dinner with the king. And as Tycho was wont to do, he started drinking early that day. And by the time he sat down to dinner later that night, he had not, as we say, broken the seal yet. You're not allowed to leave the dinner table till the king does. And the king didn't feel like leaving the dinner table that night. The story goes his bladder burst at the dinner table and he died a couple days later from basically sepsis. That's the story. We now think, well, there were a lot of people that didn't like him. Most people think nowadays he was probably assassinated, or at least killed. I don't know if assassination counts for somebody like Tycho. They actually dug up his body a couple decades ago, and they found a large amount of mercury in the hair that was remaining. So either he's mercury poisoned, or the man decided to drink mercury one day to see what would happen. Not putting anything past him. He had some issues. But this is the big one, right? So the measurements he left behind and hiring Kepler, right? These are the big things that came in. Now, Johannes Kepler, okay, the story goes that Kepler had been bugging Tycho for years. He wanted his data. Kepler really wanted Tycho's data. Really, really, really badly. And Tycho kept blowing him off until eventually he hired him. There are some theories as to who might have had Tycho killed. Not going to name any names, but there's a couple that are high on the list, right? The new king in Denmark, there's a couple others. But he wound up being able to take over the work, take over the data. That's what he wanted. So again, Tycho, great observations. Really bad theorist, right? He decided the planets orbited the sun, yeah. But the Earth was still in the center, and the sun went around the Earth, and the planets orbited around. Yeah, that makes no sense at all, does it? That's not great. I love the man, but that's not great. That's not fantastic. So, and he believed this because he couldn't observe parallax. Again, you know when somebody's really good at something, if they can't do it, nobody can? Yeah, he fell into that trap. He really did. So Kepler started from believing the Copernican model. Okay? And he went through, and over and over and over again, from Tycho's data, he tried to find a circular orbit of Mars that would work for all past observations and all future observations. He was able to get as close to prediction as 8 arc minutes of error, 1/4 of the full moon. And this is the big quote. This is the thing that changed. It changed everything in astronomy. Okay, and given the Renaissance, I think it was really, really big around that time. He says, if I'd believed that we could ignore those 8 minutes, I would have patched up my hypothesis accordingly. But since it was not permissible to ignore, those 8 minutes pointed to a road to a complete reformation in astronomy. Okay, gets really proud of himself at the end. We'll ignore that. But he was right. Right? Up to this point, when the Ptolemaic model didn't work, had more epicycles. Copernican model wasn't great, but we had to move on with it. Kepler was the first one to say, if I'm not right, it's my fault, not the universe's. And this is really one of the first main applications of the scientific method to astronomy. Of saying, if I'm not right, I'm not right. I need to fix it. Okay, what are his results? Well, he found the motion of Mars could be set by what? An ellipse. What did everybody get wrong for literally thousands of years? They're not circles. Why did we want them to be circles? We liked circles. But no, they're not circles, they're ellipses. So he fit all the orbits of all the planets to ellipses. 8 years later, this is heavy math for 8 straight years. Okay, for some, that's a lot of fun. For others, not as much. I'm the weird one here. But he determined heliocentric model, elliptical orbits and the sun at one focus was the best one. And this was as accurate as Tycho's numbers. He was able to make this work by using ellipses. Okay, now, he published this as 2 books, 1609 and 1619. Together, we call them Kepler's 3 laws of planetary motion. And they are this, and these are worth looking at to understand how the solar system really works. Right, the first here, where's my mouse? Let me see. Did we lose it? Anybody? see. Oh, did I find it? Oh, look at that. Thank you. All right. So elliptical orbits. What's an ellipse? An ellipse, for those that don't know, or those that don't want to know and don't want to remember, geometry, it's an oval with special properties. Okay, a circle. If you want to draw a circle, you put a pin in a cork board and you draw a string and you pull it taut and circle it around, right? An ellipse, instead of one pin, you use two. And you do the same thing. It's just an ellipse. And the two pins are called foci. Okay? The eccentricity is the measure of how squished it is. A circle is actually a special kind of ellipse. Okay? Semi-major axis is another term we're going to start using. That's just the distance from the center to the furthest point. We consider that the radius of the orbit when we look at it. Now, there's actually something really, really, really interesting in here. You know why people use circles for so long and why it almost worked? The Earth's orbit is really, 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 really close to a circle. It is the most circular of any orbit in the solar system. So if it was just a little bit more circular, everything would have worked beforehand. But no, that's why they kept going in circles over and over, because it almost worked. The Earth's orbit is almost circular, just not quite. Okay? So what do we mean by the sun at one focus? Well, that's just, there we go. That's just, we say, so here's the orbit of anything. The sun's at one of those foci, and we say there's nothing at the other. This gets into general relativity for why, but so I'm going to leave that for much later. But you just orbit around, and sometimes you're closer to the sun, sometimes you're further away. Again, differing speeds. No, speeds, did I say? All right, speeds. Let's look at speeds. Next up, planets travel faster when they're closer to the sun. Such that a line, okay, this is very, very, very geometry based, so I'm not going to go spend too much time on this. He actually had to explain this in terms of Euclidean geometry. Okay? In that saying that if you're close to the sun, you move faster in your orbit. If you're further away, you move slower. He says if you had a line stretching from the sun to the planet, and it moved this far in a month, further away from the sun, it only moves this far in a month, such that these two areas are equal. You know what this actually is? This is conservation of angular momentum. You know why he didn't use this as conservation of angular momentum? Conservation? Newton hadn't written it up yet. He actually did this before Newton, which is honestly pretty impressive. Because as we'll hopefully see in a little bit, Newton did some good stuff too. But what this tells us, so the first law tells us the shape of the orbits. This law tells us how fast it moves within the orbit. Okay, and finally, and this is really the big, big, big one. It doesn't seem like it, but it's the one that's really, really, really applied. The square of the orbital period in years is equal to the cube of the semi-major axis in what's called astronomical units, which is the Earth-Sun distance. So for the Earth, 1 year squared equals, well, 1 AU cubed, that's 1 equals 1. For the solar system, well, this K is a 1. I put the general formula up here because the coolest thing about this doesn't only work for the solar system. This works for every orbital system in the universe, just with a different value for K. This is something else that Newton derived later. And you can actually take Newton's laws and derive this from it, or vice versa, once you know where you're going. He did some heavy, heavy physics, all in terms of Euclidean geometry. And it's really impressive the work Kepler was able to do. So what this does is allow us to compare one orbit to another. So altogether, what Kepler was able to do was say, hey, I can explain the shape of the orbits, I can explain how they move within the orbit, and I can explain how one orbit compares to another. At this point, only one thing we were missing. Okay, evidence to back it all up. Right? What can we do? How can we back this up? How can we prove this? Because this works. He publishes it. This is good. It's awesome. It's great. Everybody loves it. Oh, of course they didn't. I think we know. The second anything new pops up, most people go, no, I'm going to stick with the thing I've known my entire life. Thank you. We're going to go with that. It's just human nature. And really, he still had three really important things he had to deal with. The Earth can't be moving. We don't feel it moving. We drop something, it falls straight down. There's no way the Earth is moving. Non-circular orbits, oh, those worried people. Suddenly the orbits aren't circular. The gods didn't make the heavens. Everything, oh my God, the universe isn't perfect. What are we going to do? It's a tough paradigm shift for people. And finally, if the Earth orbits the sun, we should be able to see parallax. We still didn't quite understand just how big the universe was at that point. We can't see parallax with the naked eye. We can barely see parallax with sort of backyard telescopes. In fact, probably not at all. You need big telescopes to be able to do it. So this is still not able to be seen. So these things still had to be dealt with. So where do we go from there? Well, next up on our list of a bunch of guys who people have probably heard of is Galileo. Now, this is the one that sort of really kind of finished things off. Right? Galileo Galilei, Italy born, okay, professor at the University of Padua. Most have probably heard of him. Okay, well known, did a lot of work, worked on falling objects at the Leaning Tower of Pisa, did a lot of things. Well, from his own work, he read the book by Copernicus. He believed it. He liked it. And he started kind of working on it. Okay, in 1608, a Dutch lens maker named Hans Lippershey invented the telescope as a toy. Just for playing around, for spyglasses, maybe for sailors, something like that. Galileo was the first person to use it to look at the sky. Okay, I'm going to start by saying something dumb. If you're the first person to look at something, you're going to see things nobody's seen before. But that's what happened here. Galileo was the first one to look at the sky with his telescope. That telescope had a magnification of about 30. Not only worse than most modern binoculars, I usually think probably a Cracker Jack box, sort of little spyglass out of there is right around the same amount. It ain't great, but it's a start. And again, if you're looking at something that nobody's ever looked at before, you're going to see new things. So what did he see? And I've got a few pictures here. Okay, he looked at the moon, and he sees, well, the moon's got craters. The moon's got mountains. The moon is not a perfect sphere. The moon is not a perfect object. Now, this doesn't destroy the Ptolemaic model, because at this point it was still all about the Ptolemaic model for most people. Now, they could explain this. People defending Ptolemy could say, no, okay, fine, the moon has imperfections, that's fine, we don't care about that. All right, fine, but it did. Okay, he saw, if you're going to look at any single object in the sky and think, okay, that's a perfect object, it'd be the sun, wouldn't it? Well, when looking at the sun, safely, don't look directly at the sun. This is the PSA, the most important thing I'm going to say tonight. Don't look directly at the sun. With anything, take your pick. Eyes, mirrors, anything. Nope, nothing. Well, the sun's not perfect either. The sun has these dark spots on it that rotate around. And not only do they rotate around, Galileo was able to time how they rotate around. He was able to calculate the rotational speed, the rotational period of the sun. He was able to prove it rotated. Well, we'd never had proof that anything had rotated before, right? The Earth was stationary, right? Even the moon, the same side of the moon, always faces us. You can argue it's embedded in a sphere and never moves. This is the first proof that something in the universe rotated. Again, people going for Ptolemy, yeah, they could explain this, but it's just another sort of knocking out the struts a little bit, step by step, right? He looked in the sky, and when you look through a telescope here, you'll notice there are so many more stars in the sky than you can see with your naked eye. The viewfinder just gets filled up with them, and he saw that. Thousands upon thousands more stars than they ever thought were there. Again, it doesn't kill the Ptolemaic model, but at the same time, if all these stars are embedded in the celestial sphere, well, why couldn't we see them before? Why are they all so faint? Right? All these things. And now, well, let's get to the two big ones now. Okay. He saw 4 moons orbiting Jupiter. We call them now the Galilean moons. Io, Europa, Ganymede, and Callisto. Okay, here you can see. These are the 4. This is an example. I should have that bigger. I should have fixed that. That should be a lot bigger. This is one of his notes where you can actually see he marked down every day how the moons move back and forth. He timed those out. He was able to work out the orbital properties of those moons based on Kepler's laws. Prove they orbited around Jupiter. Well, suddenly the Earth isn't the only thing that has stuff orbiting around it, right? Okay, can we explain that with Ptolemy? Sure. More epicycles around Jupiter with moons on them. We're good, we're golden, we're fine, everything's okay. Earth's still the center, we'll be okay. Everything will be fine. Calm down, everything's fine. But it's another one you go, I don't know. Finally, This is a big one. It doesn't seem huge, but man, this is a big one. He saw phases of Venus. And this is kind of a beautiful observation. So here's the Ptolemaic view. Venus lied on an epicycle between the Earth and Sun. So phases, it's the illuminated side. No matter where Venus is, the most we're ever going to see is a crescent phase of Venus, right? What did Galileo see? He saw quarters, crescents, gibbous, a full phase of Venus, and all the way back around. And he found that the full phase was actually smaller than the crescent and the new phases. This is proof that Venus has to orbit the sun. Same thing for Mercury. Proof. So he was able to prove with this observation that at least one and then two of the planets orbit the sun. If those two orbit the sun, well, there's no way the Ptolemaic model can do anything with this. This is the one that eventually has to everybody say, okay, no way. There's no way the Earth's at the center. It has to be the sun at this point. And this is the one that really you can't explain away in any other way. So this is the one that really, really, really kind of put the nail in the coffin for the Ptolemaic model. Now, how do we get that out there? Well, Galileo had read the novel by Copernicus, the book, and like I said, it was fantastically informational, kind of a hard read. It was only read by scientists. It was only read by people who wanted to read it. Galileo thought, well, I need to do this differently. So he was asked in 1616 by a buddy of his, who was a cardinal in the Catholic Church. He was asked, could you just not talk about this? Could you do that for me? Could you do that, please? Well, a couple popes later, because apparently they went through them quick back then, the ban got lifted. Well, his buddy was Cardinal Barberini, who wound up becoming the pope, who had been in his backyard, who had seen the things that Galileo had seen. He said, you know what, I've seen it. Go ahead and write it. So he went to work. Now, he wrote, I'm not even going to try to say that in Italian because I mess it up every time, but it basically means a conversation of the two chief world systems. And he wrote this not as a scientific paper, but as a play. He wrote it as a conversation between three people. First was Salviati, smart, witty, man about town. Women wanted to be with him, men wanted to be him. He was fantastic. Most people think Galileo modeled him after how he saw himself. Probably did. He defended the Copernican model. Second person in the discussion, his name's Sagredo. Intelligent person who'd never cared. Earth the center, sun at the center. He says, I don't care. But sure, you can talk to me about it. I'm cool with that. You can explain it to me. Last, we had Simplico. Yeah, that just says it right there, doesn't it? Not too bright, defended Ptolemy. Galileo, in some ways, was one of the first. This is some of the first ad copy, right? This is, you read this, who are you going to want to agree with? Yeah, the cool guy. This is what ads do all the time. This is what the talking heads on TV do constantly. Galileo did it. So everybody read this, and what he did, he publishes this and puts it out there. And for the time, and we could say it went viral, and of course back then, okay, saying something went viral back then is not great, but people handed it to others, they went through, and by the time anybody realized, most of the populace had read it, and again, most of the populace didn't care. So they read this and went, oh cool, that makes sense, the sun's at the center, next, now how am I eating today, right? Like, they had other things to worry about. Well, suddenly, the church realized that, wait, there's something going on. And he probably would have been okay, except Galileo. Smart people do stupid things. Galileo decided to have Simplico quote the Pope on a regular basis. This did not make the church happy. This was not awesome. Galileo wound up being pulled in because nobody expects the Inquisition. Brought him in 4 times, right? He was condemned. A couple got that. He was condemned for disobeying orders. Now, he could not be condemned for heresy. You know why? Guess who published his book? Vatican Publishing. They could not say it was heretical because they published it themselves. So he got condemned for disobeying orders, that he was told not to write about it. They actually they forged his signature on multiple documents so that they could actually convict him of disobeying a direct order from the Pope. And he was given the option to actually recant to save his life. And honestly, I think most historians agree the only reason he's even given this option is because he was buddies with the Pope back before he was the Pope, right? And I've had students ask me before, well, why didn't he try to save him? Well, it's not like the Pope can say, no, this guy's fine. No, everybody else wants blood. They're going to get it. So he recanted. There's actually, I tell this story, and it's always crazy to me. There's a statue in, I believe it's Padua, of Galileo, and a statue of him raising up from recanting. And the inscription says, "But still it moves." The story goes that Galileo recanted, said, no, I was wrong, everything was a lie, I'm sorry. Then as he stood up, under his breath said, "But still it moves." Just to be a pain. I love it as a story. I can't believe that ever happened with all the people around him. Like, think about when you're a kid. You're getting yelled at by your parents. You're turning around to mutter something under your breath. First thing that happens, right? I love the story. Man, if he did that, I'm surprised he survived. He was imprisoned at his home until his death in 1642. He was told, you will not write anything else, you will not publish anything else, you will not do any more work. So he proceeded to write like 3 to 4 more books and get those published and send them out to other publishing companies around Europe. And yeah, he just got it. He was stuck at home for 9 years and got a lot of work done is really what he did. So, he had that going for him. So Galileo was the one who was able to show, okay, there's no way the Ptolemaic model works. And brilliantly by this time, because of the way he did it, public opinion did a complete 180 without even realizing it had happened. Right? The general populace, suddenly it was no longer a question whether it's the Earth at the center or the Sun at the center. Well, it's the Sun because that book makes sense. Cool. Again, do most people care? Not really. Doesn't matter in their lives. But once sort of the general public believes it, well, then all the scientists, all the astronomers, and all the physicists who were working on it are like, okay, cool, I can actually do this now. And they went on from there. And for what it's worth, Galileo was pardoned by the Catholic Church in the 1980s. And they brought up, I believe it was John Paul II, who said, no, it's okay. All that stuff was forged. We're sorry. They currently have a really good science program, really good cosmology program. I need to give them at least a little bit of credit there, right? Before my wife yells at me. So that's what we have, right? All right. So, but we still have these questions about how these things actually work, okay? And for that, we need one more guy. And, I mean, this is kind of the heavy hitter. This is Sir Isaac Newton. He's the one who was really able to explain how all this stuff really worked. Right? But this time we're good with parallax, saying, okay, the stars are really far away. We're good with elliptical orbits. The question was still, well, when I drop something, it falls straight down. Newton took care of that. So, England-born, Cambridge-educated. While in college, he started thinking about how Kepler's orbits, Galileo's laws of motion, how those fit together, how those could work, and how he could put those together. Plague hits London in 1666. Newton goes home, and while he's there, he invents modern physics and calculus. What did you do during COVID? A lot of Tiger King, right? Yeah. He didn't have Netflix, so we had that going for us. So basically what he did, the calculus thing is fascinating. He wanted to understand how things fell, how things moved. Euclidean geometry couldn't do it. So in order to do physics, he invented a completely new branch of math. As a, oh, by the way. He didn't even publish calculus until years later, because he didn't think anybody else needed it. It was just for him. Newton was also kind of a strange duck. He had his things. He had his ways. He's probably on the spectrum. I didn't say that. So he published. Okay, he eventually published. Over that time he was home, he published the Principia Mathematica, which is the most comprehensive book of physics ever written, still to this day. He sat down, he did this all by himself. It covers the entirety of motion and energy and everything else. And the most important thing for us are the 3 laws of motion, which we still use today. Okay, an object at rest or in constant motion stays at rest, stays in constant motion, unless an unbalanced force acts upon it. We call that inertia. Okay? Don't run. It's okay. Okay, an object, response, okay, I'm not going to read this. This is force equals mass times acceleration. Basic physics, right? And finally, for every force on an object, there's an equal and opposite reaction force. The big one for our purposes is number 1 up here. An object stays at rest or in constant motion unless an unbalanced force acts upon it. That explains everything about how things move. Okay, think about this. The argument is always, if the Earth is moving, how come when I drop something it falls right beside me? Okay. We've all probably been in a car running down the interstate, right? Say you're going 65, 70 miles an hour. Have you ever taken a bottle of water and poured it in a cup? Do you have to hold the cup up like this and the water like that and have it flow back into the cup? No. Why? Because the car's moving, you're moving, the bottle's moving, the water's moving, the cup's moving, everything's moving at the same speed, right? Therefore, it's like they're not moving at all. That's what inertia means. That means that as the Earth rotates, we're all going with it, folks. That means when you drop something, yeah, it falls straight down. And this takes care of really the last major problem that we had. Parallax, stars are really far away. Elliptical orbits take care of everything. Inertia explains why we don't feel that motion. I mean, if we want to go with it, the Earth's rotating at even speed. It's going around the sun. Sun's going around the center of the galaxy. Milky Way is moving fast through space, y'all. If we want to work out our actual velocity with some sort of rest frame, we're going a few thousand miles an hour at minimum. We don't feel it. We don't feel like we're moving. All right. Thank you all very much. I'm going to wrap up there. I like to wrap up with Newton. Thank you. It's more of a lecture than anything.
Thank you so much for your time and for this extraordinary presentation. And again, I think it points out again, science is constantly evolving, and as we get new tools to develop deeper and more complex theories, we learn more from it. And so, especially all you young people, keep learning, keep moving the science forward. So, anyway. Want to thank you all for coming. If you haven't been out to our scopes yet, we'll run another set of tours out to our 6-inch refractor and our 20-inch reflectors. So thanks again for coming. We'll be look to our website for when our Friday night programs start back up again. Thanks again.
All right. Thank you.